You're listening to CinePunked, interactive discussions for film lovers. This episode, Burn the Witch. I'm Robert J. Simpson, and as always, I am joined by my erstwhile colleague, Dr. Rachael Kelly.
Hello.
And our token member of the public, the man who mixes these shows and makes us all sound so much better than we are in real life, Ben Simpson.
Hello, everybody.
So today we're talking about The Love Witch. This is the 2016 American horror comedy directed by Anna Biller. And this is perhaps one of the most provocative and interesting and innovative films that I have seen in many a year. So we've been talking about this for a while behind the scenes, and we felt that actually this would be a really good one to get our teeth into.
Are we calling it horror?
Well, see...
Yeah.
I think back in the days where I was editing a horror magazine, this would have been top of my list for films to include.
But why, though? This is the question. I mean, it makes lots of visual references to the Hammer series. And that's obviously a very conscious choice by Biller. But why are we calling it horror? Is it because it explores sort of the witch and the connection to female sexual power? Is that the horror element? Is it because there's a teensy bit of gore?
I think the film that this perhaps is most closest to for my mind is actually The Wicker Man, which again is sort of, it actually is a genre kind of flipping. It doesn't sit neatly within horror. I mean, a lot of times it's described as a musical, which The Wicker Man actually is. And to be fair, there is a fair bit of music, a musical interplay in The Love Witch as well. But I think when you've got those tropes of, the paganism, the witchcraft, there is a fair bit of killings.
There are killings, but I wouldn't call it a fair bit of killing.
More than one. They are fairly regular.
Okay.
And whilst admittedly there is not a huge amount of gore within the film, when we're talking about a film that in many ways is paying homage to the films that were produced in the 60s and the 70s, and you mentioned Hammer Horror, I'd actually say that probably the visual reference is more the Roger Corman AIP films. But when you're doing that, I think that... I think actually you don't need the gore, because the gore was kind of one of those things that was secondary to a lot of those horror pictures.
I'm going to go back to this idea that there's more than one killing. There's a suicide, certainly. There is one explicit killing, and there's one hinted at possible nod to killing.
And there's another death.
There's another death, but nobody's murdering anybody.
Well, how do you define a horror film?
I think there's got to be some element that's actually supposed to be horrific, whether that flows from supernatural elements, whether that flows from sort of the darkness that lies within all man. To me, it's more of an exploration of female desire, and for those who are calling it horror, I don't know, that seems fairly telling to me. The paganism element is not played for horror. It's played for spectacle, I would argue, and it's played for the sort of the nod to the divine feminine and female empowerment. But if there's any horror connected to the witchcraft, I think it's actually in the sort of the quasi-abusive relationship that the leader of the coven has with the members of the coven.
We'll get into that as well, I think, a little bit later, because I want to talk about that specifically today. But I do think that this is a film that draws Anna has talked quite happily about this. This is a film that draws very heavily on those certain genre films from that era.
Agreed.
And whilst I take the point that for anyone who kind of is more used to more out and out horror films, this sort of doesn't really fit that brand. I also don't think it's really a comedy. But if you look at things like the Wikipedia listing and a lot of the reviews, they refer to this as a horror comedy.
Well, that's because they have absolutely no category for this.
Before you and I get into this for the next half an hour,
I
want to ask Ben. So, when we were recording the last show, we gave you a bit of a build up to this one.
Yep.
What did you make of it?
It's a strange one. Definitely is a strange one. I wouldn't have classed it as a comedy, and I don't think I would have classed it as a horror either. It's weird.
Okay.
It's a pastiche of a lot of different genre nods, I would have said.
Broadly...
I don't think there was one bit in it that made me laugh.
I don't know. We were sort of watching the tail end of it again here when we came into studio today, and I mean, there's elements of it that I think that are certainly amusing. There's some of the very laboured performances and lines that, particularly on multiple viewings, you kind of pick up the subtleties of it. You kind of appreciate just exactly what they're doing, and it is quite amusing to a certain extent.
It's played for the sort of to the absurd level, isn't it? So yeah, maybe not sort of rolling about in the floor comedy, but sort of sophisticated, isn't that clever kind of
I think
comedy maybe.
I'm very, very aware that a lot of the kind of the pieces that have been written about this film do seem to have somewhat missed the point somewhat, and I think that it draws from what we broadly classify as exploitational cinema, which would incorporate things like horror, the witchcraft films that were all in vogue at the end of the 60s and into the 70s. I think that those things are there. There's also a kind of surrealist, psychedelic kind of film as well. There is an awful lot of, particularly in the visuals.
It is pretty out there.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with that at all.
It's going for a very specific aesthetic, and that aesthetic is designed to kind of make you think of films of a particular era, including The Hammer. I'm not absolutely 100% agreeing, and I know that was a very conscious decision on the part of Anna Biller to evoke that. For me, what it's that sort of evocation of Hammer horror is not so much about the horror as such, but to kind of draw attention to the feminist issues associated with the horror. So to me, anybody labeling this horror, I think, you're there's a very interesting gender discourse going on with the desire to label that horror.
I think part of the problem is that with any film that you market, you have to stick a label onto it, otherwise they can't market it.
Yeah.
So when you look at the companies that have actually picked up Anna's films for distribution as well, they tend to be the sort of distributing companies that normally deal with things like horror pictures. I think this was Fright Fest at one point picked this one up as well. So you have these big kind of names within the horror community, and they're the ones that ultimately have got behind it. Now, the horror community is sophisticated enough to realize that not everything is out and out gross, fantastical, shocking even. What We Do in the Shadows is ostensibly, in some respects, a horror film, but it's also a rather brilliant cutting comedy mockumentary. It's not very horrific, but it's within broadly, if you're going to define it, it's a horror comedy.
Yeah.
And part of that is the aesthetics and those choices that you make.
But again, I'm asking, where does the horror come in? What is it that's horrific about this, apart from that rather brutal murder? Well, which is, it's the very, spoiler alert, it's the very close of the film.
Can we get into maybe the representation of the female in a bit? Because I think, as you sort of hinted at, that is probably where the actual horror is.
I think we'll get into the representation of the female.
But let's talk first of all about, let's take us at very surface level, the aesthetics of this film. Which
gorgeous! Oh, they are so gorgeous.
Oh yeah, fabulous! I couldn't get over the way you told me about it, and you were saying that when was the shot?
2015, I think.
15.
Yeah.
And the way it looks of a certain time. It doesn't look new.
No, it looks like it's 50 years old.
Yeah. It's fabulous. That's amazing.
It took me right up until the third act to even be certain that it wasn't supposed to be a period piece. I don't get cars, you see.
Yeah. If you
it says the token feminist, completely gender conforming here, but I didn't get the car references. It wasn't until Trish pulled out a mobile phone that I went, oh God, is this supposed to be present day?
Yeah. If you didn't see the black BMW that what's her name, pulls up in, the one that Trish, yeah, gives her the key to the house.
Mm.
Yeah, if you hadn't known when that car was from, you probably wouldn't know, or if you weren't into cars. But yeah, that was a big giveaway for me anyway.
There's something about the film and the way that it looks that it's meant to be sort of timeless.
Yes.
It is very much of an era. It evokes that sort of 1950s, 1960s visuals.
Yeah.
It was shot on 35mm. They're using the same kind of cameras, the same kind of lenses as best as possible.
I mean, the cinematographer is a specialist in shooting that kind of look as well, isn't he?
I can't imagine he gets a lot of call for that, but
It seems to
He
be one of the
should.
reasons why.
He should.
I'm sure I was
That's
reading
brilliant.
that's one of the reasons why she used him, because there's very, very few people that actually understand how to use 35mm these days,
Yeah.
and to use it in that sort of way, and to understand the lighting that goes into making it look a particular way, and the processing that makes it look a particular way. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's rich. It's colourful. The reds are so red. It's absolutely a feast for the eyes, this film.
I think when you're talking about it, not only just the way that the camera work is, but there's also a lot to be said about
the set design, everything.
Yeah.
Sublime.
Yeah.
So, do you know anything about how this was, about the design of this film at all?
I knew nothing.
So, Anna Biller is not just the director and the writer of this.
At the start it says she's the production.
She writes the music. She also did the production design.
She wrote the
and-
music?
She wrote
Yeah.
the music, yeah.
Wow.
You can get it on her website.
Cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yep. And she also is responsible for a lot of the actual set.
And the costumes as well.
Costumes.
She
Yeah, the
basically
costume,
she
fabulous.
stitched the costumes herself, and and she threaded the rugs. Apparently, you can't get a pentagram rug for love nor money in the US. She basically threaded it herself because she knew this aesthetic that she wanted. She knew this exact look that she wanted. She did the paintings herself.
Couldn't get the right look for the stuff, so again, she decided to go and hand paint everything on
She
on set.
painted those.
Uh-huh.
That's incredible.
I mean, you know how I have hesitations with auteur theory, but if there was ever going to be a director that was a prime candidate for auteur theory, it is Anna Biller, because there's just so much of the creative work that goes into her films is done by her.
So, auteur theory, do you understand what that is, Ben?
Nope.
Excellent. I do love these little moments where we can kind of educate our
No,
audiences.
I do not know.
So, auteur is the French word for author.
Author.
Okay. And the idea, basically, and Rachel will correct me if I'm wrong because she teaches this stuff.
I do.
I know, because I've had to substitute you for classes. I've seen it in your notes.
Yeah.
Auteurs, basically, the idea is that the film that you're watching is basically comes down to being the creation of one person, usually the director. And that everything that you see within the film is under the control of the director. They are the author of the film.
Okay.
Incredibly problematic, because there are many, many more creative professionals involved in creating the way a film looks, usually.
So we've all worked together on film projects, but we have also all worked on sets.
Mm-hmm.
So we all understand.
Right. Yeah. What is needed?
Yeah. You know that when we're on set.
Yeah.
You know, there's the actors, there's the extras, then there's the camera operators, there's the directors, and they often seem
The
to work.
ADs, the sound guys,
That's it. Somebody's written a script, somebody's producing the whole damn thing and writing the checks in the first place. Somebody else is then going to market the shit out of that.
Yeah.
If you talk about something like Blair Witch Project, I mean, there was the marketing that really sold that film. So, I mean, to me, those guys are the authors as much as anybody else. But when you're looking at this stuff, you know that these people all seem to work independently of each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way that you can turn around and say, that is amazing because of that director on his own.
Yeah.
But I think there are certain filmmakers who, when you look at them, they do seem to leave a mark. So the idea is that certain directors, when you look at their films, you can tell it's their film. So Quentin Tarantino, you can usually spot a Quentin Tarantino film, or a Hitchcock.
Orson Welles,
Welles.
my favourite.
Hitchcock. Anna Biller, definitely, but she hasn't made that many films, so it might be harder to kind of tease this out of people. But then you have other directors who actually don't just direct, they do other bits onto the production as well. So writer-directors, we're fairly... Yeah. But if you have somebody who's then also writing the music, so we're talking about like John Carpenter. You know, he often writes the music for his films. They have a very distinct feel, as well as him having involvement with the script and the direction. Or, well, Hitchcock had a lot to do with his scripts as well. I think Charlie Chaplin would write his films, he would direct his films, he would star in his films, and he would write the music as well. So,
Doesn't Adam Sandler, she does that as well, doesn't he?
Adam Sandler is an auteur.
Do you know what? It's completely. I will listen to any arguments for any director as an auteur. I have sat and patiently listened to arguments for Michael Bay as an auteur.
So Adam Sandler, does he?
I'm pretty sure. Like, if you look up most of the films that he's done, he's written them, he acts in them, he's written music for them.
It's certainly true that you would be able to recognise an Adam Sandler film in a lineup.
That's true.
You see, this is the problem with auteur theory, isn't it, though?
Well, it's not necessarily a mark of quality, it's a mark of sort of distinctive.
It was originally a mark of quality as well, though.
But we know it's not really.
Well, yeah, but that's one of the problems, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quality is subjective.
But Anna Biller, I think, just absolutely takes the biscuit for somebody who really, she's in control of every aspect of that production.
Yeah. Do you think she is that way because of all the problems that they had?
Did you read about the problems that they had on the production?
I read a few little things, yeah.
Yeah, she's done this before, so she's made a number of short films. About 2007, she released a film called Viva. Have you seen that?
No.
I haven't, but I'd like to.
Viva is very distinctive, very interesting in its own right. It is much more obviously a kind of homage and pastiche of sort of the sexploitation films of the 1970s. And she stars in that as well. So she puts herself up on screen. She does say that she went for the sort of criticism and feedback about herself that she hasn't experienced since she was a teenager. It wasn't necessarily a great experience in that respect, I think. But whenever she was making Viva, and also when she's making The Love Witch, she's had problems within the crew itself. Now, she had a Twitter discussion about this not that long ago, and she talked about her experiences and the fact that the line producer basically ran off, that the ADs were constantly being switched around on her, that people were telling her that they couldn't do things that actually they could do, just constantly trying to sabotage the production.
Why? Why?
The suggestion that is kind of there, but obviously we cannot say because we were not part of the production, is that it's basically because she's a woman.
Really?
And a lot of the people who are working here are men who don't want to see women succeed.
She's also got a very specific vision, hasn't she, that is not necessarily... I want to say it's anti-male, because it certainly isn't anti-male, but it's not one that is as comfortably pro-male as a lot of what Hollywood is trying. It tends to produce.
I think she definitely does films that are great for actors, but I can see why, if you were part of the industry, you might have resistance to it. But if you look at Love Witch, I mean, Ben, you're a straight manly man.
Yeah. Got a beard and everything.
Beards everywhere.
Well, depends what kind of beard you're talking about, isn't it?
Ben has a beard. Who knew?
I can show you a photo.
I don't need to see that.
What, my beard? You can see it right now. There you go. It's on the microphone.
Oh, our poor listeners. For you watching The Love Witch,
yeah.
I mean, how did you find that as an experience? Did you find was the material there to titillate you? Were you titillated?
Do you mean is
let's talk about the eye candy.
Right, there's a lot of eye candy in that film. There's so much eye candy in that film.
Was that sort of typical of the sort of films that you would watch?
Not really. No, I'm more about action and.
As a heterosexual male watching that film, there are images within that film that are going to appeal to a typical heterosexual male.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about scantily clad women.
Oh yeah, tits everywhere. Yeah.
We're talking about not actually clad women a lot of the time.
Yeah.
We're also talking about not actually clad men, though.
Well,
there's a lot of dongs flying about too.
We were
it's
having
like
this
watching
discussion.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, on the car on the way down. I think the dongs outnumber the muffs.
Yeah, I would agree.
I haven't
There's
counted.
not much muff.
Yeah, I genuinely believe there's more dong than bush.
I haven't counted, but I do think it's one. I mean, so this is. Let's bring up the issue of feminism.
Let's.
But let's ease our way into this one, because I think for a lot of people this is something that they're going to find difficulty getting their head around, probably including me. But I think it's one of the things that sort of sets this apart from most films.
Yeah, Biller is very definitely a feminist director. I mean, she's a self-identified feminist director, and I don't think you could watch The Love Witch and not understand that there's a feminist sensibility. Or is that just me? Am I fundamentally broken in this respect now that I can't watch anything without doing the gender thing?
I think you're fundamentally broken.
I probably am.
Whenever I watched it, like I heard you were telling me, feminist thing and all this stuff, and I just watched it for what it was. I didn't have any preconceived ideas about it.
Yeah, I think as a film works on a couple of different levels.
I agree, yeah.
I think that there is this sort of, and this is why I want to ask you about it first, because I think there's this sort of surface thing that appeals to sort of typical cinema going audiences. Now, most films tend to be produced with the idea of the male, what we call the male gaze. This idea that films are basically shot for men. There's stuff that we put ourselves in position. It's about pleasing our egos and our ideals, and that's why generally, you get to see all these naked women, but you don't get to see any cock. So when you have a film that presents you with the other, which goodness knows half the population have, it is presenting this different viewpoints. This is part of why I think that she is definitely a feminist filmmaker, because
because there's a lot of dong in it.
I think because there is dong at all, it generally always sticks out because it's not something you see.
Now, let's be honest, Game of Thrones has a lot of dong, and nobody's going to argue that as a feminist tract.
No. Have you watched that new Netflix series, Altered Carbon?
No.
Oh, I really want to see that.
There's dong in that. There's lots of dong, but there's also lots of tits.
But traditionally speaking, within Hollywood, within that structure, the reality is you do not see cock on screen.
No, you don't. I mean, it's the last great taboo is an erect penis, isn't it?
An erect ejaculating penis, I think, is the last taboo.
I think it's just erect, to be honest.
One of the other things, though, about this, in terms of the penises that you see on screen, it tends to be within the rituals that are held by the pagan coffin. Yeah. Now, this in itself is very much drawn, I think, from those sort of exploitational films about witches that were produced in the 60s and 70s, largely including a guy called Alexander Saunders, who was the self-styled king of the witches. I've written a couple articles about him. I must say. I
haven't read any, sorry, Bob.
Terrible. I'm not even going to ask Rachel.
I haven't read them either.
Anyway.
Sorry.
But when you watch those films, the aesthetic is very similar to those scenes of the actual rituals itself. It was very much about him, and there are a lot of cocks flapping around the place as well. Like, I think
it's a direct reference.
It's a direct reference, of course it is. Yeah. I mean, Anna Biller does talk about having taken Samantha Robinson to actual rituals and things as well as part of the research for the part. So they have very much invested themselves completely into this world in which they're going to portray on the screen.
Right, to make it as legit as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is based on rituals that do exist, on the practices of coffins that, again, do exist. So none of that is necessarily too far away from reality.
Mm-hmm.
The same way, I've walked into shops that are like the shops that they feature in this film.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've never gone asking for a witch bottle, but I'm sure they exist as well.
It seems plausible. I haven't
Is that a real thing?
Witch bottles?
Yeah.
Do you think they really have tampons in them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk
somebody
about
else's piss.
Somebody else's piss.
People buy these things.
I feel at this point I should be calling one of my Wiccan friends rather than me kind of...
He probably should.
So we'll save that conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But witch bottles are something that is known about. They do occasionally get discovered by people who are renovating houses and things.
Okay.
They're kind of like a charm. So they do exist. I mean, the same way they have like sort of the voodoo dolls within this, which again are concepts that do exist. This idea of an effigy that represents a person that's used to transfer energy and power and sort of attention. So there is a huge amount of that within film. I don't mean to sound like I feel like I'm lecturing now.
This is interesting. Particularly in light of Biller's recorded statements on witchcraft as sort of a symbolic means of empowering women within film. She's quite dismissive of that. And I happen to completely agree with her. This idea that she's very much tapping into that idea of the divine feminine as sort of this source of enormous female power, and it's sort of being analogous to, this is definitely feminist because we're talking about divine feminine here, but in fact what that power is predicated on is this idea that spells and magic is possible, which not to denigrate a religion, but there's no evidence that spells are possible, that magic is possible. And so this idea that somehow empowers women versus sort of the violence that empowers men in film is kind of spurious.
Other fabricated religions are available.
Yeah, I should just say I have no affiliation to any religion whatsoever. I would
pray to whichever god you like. It's not going to work. So let's look at this as a film. So when she's talking about the idea of, and she describes in her press notes, the sexy witch, on the one hand, this is somebody who is very much a token of the male gaze. It's something that we can kind of lust after.
And she positions herself as such. I mean, she's actively trying to be the token of the male gaze. She's saying that to Trish. She's arguing to Trish that is what a woman ought to be.
The other side of that as well, though, is that there is, as Anna has sort of suggested, the idea that the woman as a witch is also a position of female empowerment. And within the screen, I don't really know that I agree with that, because I think the history of the cinematic representations of witchcraft are very much more geared towards male lust,
absolutely,
and desire rather than anything else. And you know, she is the sexy witch.
Yeah, and it strikes me very much that that's what Biller is trying to do with. She's having fun, or playing. Certainly, maybe fun is the wrong word, but she's playing with this idea that witch equals empowered, equals sort of sexually liberated, and sexual liberation equals empowered, and she's kind of deconstructing that in a really interesting way. I mean, Elaine is not exactly a mouthpiece for feminine revolution. You know, she's, I must be loved, love me. I am only valuable when I am loved by a man. And Trish, and if anybody, is the person who's standing there going, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, she says you sound like you're being brainwashed by the patriarchy.
Yeah. But yet Trish is not our heroine. Elaine is our heroine. We are being asked to view this
anti-hero.
Yeah, okay. Well, anti-hero, I don't know that I would go as far as saying anti-hero. I think she's an incredibly sympathetic character. She's just clearly...
Elaine?
Yeah, yeah, she's
Sympathetic?
just clearly...
I think she's mental.
She's not... She makes bad decisions, and her decision-making process is clearly flawed.
I pity your poor husband right now. Flawed decisions. I'm sorry I stabbed you, darling.
Okay, but that's not. You see this.
I'm sorry I buried you.
That is the culmination of a series of bad decision begetting bad decision begetting bad decision. I mean, that's the climax of the bad decisions. That's not necessarily Elaine, and I think the whole film is kind of arguing that there's just this fundamental misunderstanding. I mean, I know Biller talks about this idea that if men would only love women the way women want to be loved, then there'd be a much greater understanding between the sexes. I mean, that's one woman's interpretation. It's perfectly valid, and I think Elaine is kind of voicing that.
But she's sick because she had she said she was cured by a ritual that was, obviously she has a flashback to said ritual, so she must be sick, and she must still be sick.
She is sick. There is a discussion of this as well in sort of the discussions that have been had about the film. Elaine is mentally unwell.
Yes,
very
she's
clearly.
Absolutely. I mean, utterly dependent on others. And
but seeing her as a hero, I just can't, and I don't think we should, and I don't think I want.
No, I don't think it's intended for you to see her as a hero. I don't get.
I find this really interesting that both men here are arguing against seeing her as a hero, while the sole woman in the room is.
What's heroic about it?
One doesn't have to be heroic to be the hero of a piece. One just has to be the vehicle onto which one is supposed to be.
She is the central,
mapping oneself.
I get that she is the central protagonist, and that the film is very much about her and her experiences and how she views the world. So actually, it's quite unusual. We see the world from her eyes. This is not a male gaze kind of film. This is actually a film that's all about the female gaze. We see how her distorted view of her relationships. We see her hallucinations and her fantasies, her dreams, her memories, they're all filtered through her eyes.
She's quite as we see. I do think she's supposed to be a sympathetic character. I don't think we're supposed to agree with her decisions at all. So I mean, she is clearly unhinged.
In terms of sympathy, I mean, there is an element of it that you do kind of feel. I mean, you do feel a little bit for her. The fact that she is so kind of besotted by this desire for love and affection. She
doesn't feel fully whole unless she is being loved by someone.
But the problem is her love is not it's not actually love at all. It's a temporary state of it's a temporary high.
She's in love with being in love, and she needs to be loved in order to feel like a functional human being, and that's clearly problematic. And that, but what I think
she meets Richard for what, like 2 days, and the next thing she's like, he's going to propose, which on the one hand is very much of those kind of old films where two actors meet, they kind of get thrown into a situation, and the next day they're going to get married because it's all perfect.
See, that's the other thing about this film timeline.
Yeah, go on.
Everything happens so quick, and there isn't really, you don't get a sense of like time. I think that there's supposed to be considerable amount of times in between each of these fellas, right? From what I gather, that affair that she had with Richard,
the husband.
No,
it's not Richard, is it?
No.
Yeah, the husband. Yeah, Richard's husband.
Is he?
Yeah, or her husband. Griff is the cop.
Griff is the cop.
Yeah. Richard, like from just what Trish was saying in the film, it seemed like this affair, bunny ears, had happened for a long period of time. Like, you don't really exactly see, Trish doesn't say how long she's going away on this thing for.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It is it is hard at times to work out the time scale of things that happen in the film.
And then obviously you're given a clue that the Wade? Is that
the first dude?
No, the second dude. He's not the actual first dude, because the first dude was her husband.
Wayne.
Obviously she had that one night, and then 3 weeks later.
Well, she also says that as she makes a reference to the fact that she basically has this one night of intimate relationships with them, and then they die.
Yeah, but
does that happen?
Does that happen in one night, or?
I think with Wayne, it's definitely one night.
Oh, it's definitely one night with Wayne. Yeah. I think the Richard affair goes on for a few weeks. Certainly, I mean, he sends her a birthday card,
but it's not that long, I don't think.
I don't know that it's particularly long. No, but
because is she not with him whenever they discover the body?
Wayne's body?
Mm-hmm.
No, that was before.
Oh gosh, I need to watch this again.
Because
I'm going to cut this bit because it's just too confusing.
Well, basically, I've just watched this, so
you just watch it and you can't follow the time screen.
No, well, the point I'm making is everything. It doesn't. You don't get a sense of time, and I think there's supposed to be a sense of time. Like, you only get little hints of, like, the 3 weeks that happened in between. The girl going and reporting it to the police. Saying, Wayne's gone missing. He's been gone for 3 weeks. Can you look for him? I'm worried about him, and all this stuff. All this mail's piled up,
Okay.
And then they go out and look for his body, find him at the house, and the bottle of piss and all that.
You've picked up actually more than I did in terms of the time. So obviously there is enough. There's clues there if you actually listen.
Yeah.
I mean, I got the sense that Wayne certainly is a one night thing because he can't handle the love that he has for her.
No, and is there other relationships that she has in between these guys as well? Because I noticed, I
don't think so.
Because when she pulls out the drawer,
when
they pull out the drawer and you have a look at the little.
There's 3 of them.
There's 4.
Is there 4?
The fourth. You know what the name of the fourth one is?
No.
Robert.
Okay.
Spot this. My name's in there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yep. I can't wait till that happens.
There you go.
Yeah, so there must have been another bloke.
I know that Anna has said the original cut of this film would have been about 3 hours long if she'd included everything, but she had the permit.
Yeah. So maybe that was
maybe he's... Yeah.
Could be. I mean, you talk about the bottle of piss. The other thing about this one is, I think something else that a typical male-oriented film would not do is
menstruation.
Menstrual blood.
Oh,
the tampon. Yeah.
Pissing in the jar too.
Yeah. This is a film.
You're into that.
This is a film. This is a film. I'm never quite sure how serious we take these podcasts. It's like,
I would take them very seriously. I'm just trying.
But we have a laugh as well.
I'm trying to put you off.
He did. Professional face on. So, it's one of the things that this film is also concerned with the female fluids.
Yes.
which is not something that you find in a lot of films. I mean, blood is sort of the typical
Yeah.
thing you see.
I find that funny, you know, in her monologue thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously she's making her witch jar, and, you know, she takes it out and puts it in the jar, and they're like, oh, some men have never even seen a tampon, and all this stuff is like, you know, yeah.
No, I think this is very current again, because I mean, there's been another big debate on Twitter recently about period shaming, and about you know, a lot of stuff has been a lot of threads on Twitter talking about this, and a lot of stuff has come out where, and I certainly wouldn't claim for a second that the two gentlemen in the room fall under this category, but there are some men who very clearly don't know how any of this works. I mean, there's stories of women being asked by their male colleagues, can you not just hold it in? Do you know? Oh, is that an option?
No,
I wish we'd thought of that. But
wow.
Yeah, this is again why I think that Elaine is such an interesting character. I mean, I think she's conceived of as this masculinist nightmare. She is everything that men are afraid that women are, and she's not being. We're not being asked to say that yes, she's right, but she's embodying all of these fears that are embodied in the, you know, the sort of the female, and to such an extent that it is kind of ludicrous. Do you know that she's this sort of, she embodies the divine feminine. She uses her sexuality to trap men. She's absolutely this black gaping hole of need. I must be loved, desperate to entrap men, desperate to be married, and then she murders them. Do you know? And also she gets her period, and very obviously gets her period and sticks her period products in places that men find them. She is supposed to be this masculinist nightmare, and we are supposed to look at her as a ludicrous symbol of everything that men are afraid of.
Are you talking about the jar?
Yeah.
Right, okay. It's like, where else in this movie did they find...
I did mean the jar, just to be clear. And she puts a tampon in a jar of weed.
Yeah.
That she buries.
No, she doesn't bury it. She just leaves it.
Oh, she just leaves it, that's right, yeah.
See, but even her monologue there said that, you know, if you bury it, you know, it'll protect from evil spirits. But she just leaves. Like, I thought she was going to put it in the...
She clearly isn't bothered. She's not bothered. She's crazy. She's not committed to the cause properly. I think part of me also feels that she's using witchcraft purely as a way to get her own ends. It's a way to get some.
Do you think she's an nympho?
No, I don't think she's an nympho.
No, I think she genuinely. I don't think she's after people for sex. The fact is, they die before she gets the chance to have a relationship.
She uses.
Yeah, but like maybe if she went about it in a normal fashion.
Well, you see, she's got this idea. She's been fed this idea by kind of patriarchal society, which I'm sure is Biller's point. She's been fed this idea that the only possible way you can get a man to fall in love with you is by making your body available to him. And this is sort of, she presents this as though this is sexual liberation, where in fact we're watching this going, sweetheart, no, that's the opposite of sexual liberation. But again, it's very much in keeping with how this kind of sexual liberation has been sold to women.
Well, I mean, she's aside of the fact that Samantha Robinson is absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
There is also
10 out of 10.
Is that 10 out of 10?
10 out of 10.
Easily, yeah. I would.
Samantha, if you're listening.
Sorry, Samantha, I'm married.
I noticed Rachel didn't declare her status.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm married and also straight, but I would.
But there is this thing where she clearly does not need to enhance, but she ends up putting on a wig and the sort of
I find that weird.
And stuff. The wig on top of her hair that sort of looks kind of like the hair that she's got in the wig.
Yeah, but then what's the blonde wig for? Because there is a blonde wig.
There is a question.
But you see, I'm watching this as a woman, and I'm totally understanding this because, and this is why I think there's a message here that maybe. And I mean, I'm not suggesting this in a patronising way, but maybe male viewers don't read this on this level, because there is this constant message to women that that you are not enough unless you enhance.
I disagree with that.
No, I
men always do, but then they always point out when you're not wearing makeup. God, you look very tired today.
That's my wife.
but there's documented evidence that women who go to a job interview not wearing makeup are less likely to get the job.
Absolutely, no, I completely understand this, and it is, as you say, it is well documented, and this does happen, and men do still, when presented with the options, go for the dressed up rather than the dressed down.
But the women who are wearing natural look makeup, because there's this idea that, you know, you're always going to choose the natural woman, the woman who's not made up, the woman who's not overdoing the sort of like the
foundation, kicking it on.
Exactly. But
the natural makeup is a natural look. It's not at all.
It's not at all. No. And the amount of effort that goes into creating that natural look is something that we women sit and have a little laugh to ourselves about. Because the actual natural look is not what it's presented as in the media.
There is very definitely a whole discourse on the male gaze within this film and within males' perceptions of women and what women have to do in order to be presented. And I think the fact that Anna herself has had so many difficulties in getting her films made and is so determined to do things her way and be so controlling of it, I think is there is a commentary there that, you know, we could talk for hours on. And
I'm glad she made this movie and actually got it finished, even though she did have all that trouble, because it is fabulous.
It's a fantastic film.
It is absolutely mesmerising. I've seen a number of reviews talk about you have to just kind of give in to it, and I think that's very much the case. There is a sort of a slight resistance at the start where you go, what is this? And then you just go, okay, I'm with it now, and you just let it happen, and it's mesmerising.
Yeah, it takes you a little bit to get into it, like at the start, because I'm like, are you sincere? Are you not sincere? What's your deal? You know, trying to figure Elaine out. You know,
it's the surrealist quality to it as well. I mean, which sort of for me isn't even exemplified with the hallucinations. It's when they go into the Victorian tea room.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're already represented with a film that feels like it's 1964.
And it goes to like the 18th century,
and there's no
it's pastiche to the point of absurdism. And that, I think, is underlining how absurd a lot of what it's dealing with is.
I forgot as well about the medieval fair.
Oh yeah, the Renaissance fair.
and the mock marriage.
Yep. Yeah.
Which we should probably comment on briefly, because it is such a turning point in the film.
That was bizarre. That was so bizarre to me. Like, oh, let's go ride a horse today.
Yeah.
And then there's, like, that came out of nowhere, so it did. I was like, well, what?
It feels very much in keeping with the rest of the film. I don't know that I got it.
I certainly didn't.
I mean, there's an element again of this predatory nature about the character as well, that she takes him to this fair, and her coven are already on hand to set up this mock marriage, which is then followed by...
Do you think that was predetermined by her?
Of course it was.
I don't think it was predetermined by her. See, Ben doesn't think it was predetermined either.
I happen to think that she is a much more self-aware and manipulative person. I think that she very clearly is in control.
Oh, I have horses, let's go riding tomorrow, and then that to just pop up right where they're taking a break.
That's not going to happen unless she knows that they're going to be there and she decides that they're going to have their break there. And it is all her coven, it is all her friends are there. And they do suddenly have this mock marriage. That is deliberate.
I think if she were as predatory as you suggest, we would have access to that, because we have access to this character. We have enormous access to this character, and I have not got anything predatory about her. I've got desperate from her. Needy.
She picks her friend's husband to have an affair with.
Yeah, because he's there. She's so full of need.
I don't think it's even just because she was there. I think that is a choice. And at the end of the day, if she respected...
She respected marriage.
She respected Trish, which she doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think, but it's not even just that scene itself, I think, is sort of hint of the predatory, but there's also the ritual that she has again with the coven, and she's got the photograph, and they're basically having a binding ritual, which he is not part of.
No.
He is not there. He is not aware of this, but they're having a ritual that basically sort of says that the two of you are going to be together.
Yeah, but it doesn't work.
But at the end...
That's kind of the point of it. It doesn't work. She's bought into this illusion of female power that's been sold to her by a predatory man.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I refer back to Alexander Saunders and the the witchcraft covens.
I mean, her initiation into the coven, it's presented as rape.
Yeah, it seems to have scarred her pretty badly.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, in terms of a lot of the stuff that's going on in Hollywood and a lot of the references towards sexual abuse and manipulation, it seems very pertinent.
Yeah, I think there were predators in that movie, and I don't think any of them are Elaine.
No, I think I think she is a predator, but I think she quite possibly is shaped by some of the men that are around her as well. In many respects, I think of something like I Spit in Your Grave, where you have a character a woman who's raped, who then takes revenge on the men around her. She kind of comes back after them. And uses her sexuality as a way to kind of lure them into a false sense of security and bumps them off one by one.
I completely disagree with that reading of Elaine.
I'm going to ask Anna about this.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to listening to that.
She's going to put me down, I know. But
if she does, you have to come back on here and go, yes, Rachel, you were right. And I was wrong.
I will. I won't cut this section out of the podcast.
Okay.
I promise. But I do think that there's very definitely a predatory element towards the sort of the covens and the rituals that they have, and the fact that there is this manipulation that's still about this one guy, and they are very, very strongly sex oriented.
They are, but I find that as played as though, I don't want to say pathetic. I think pathetic is the wrong word, but it's certainly, I don't think the power that Elaine thinks those rituals are invested in, or the coven thinks are invested in those rituals, I don't think the film gives us any sense that power is real power. I think it's illusory power.
Possibly, although there is this, there are a series of images that are around the flat that predetermine some of the outcomes of the men that she is involved with.
Yeah.
So there is some sort of link on an occult level. I'm very aware that we're kind of running out of time as well. We've got about 5 minutes. One of the things I do want to kind of raise, we were talking about this the other week, actually, is for a woman who is basically the sexual object of desire for the film, Samantha Robinson. She does not get her kid off.
She does not get her kid off, no.
She does.
She does, but she doesn't.
She gets her kid off, but her tits are always covered.
You
I
can
noticed
see
that.
a little nipple poking through.
But they're covered by hair. I mean, I was wondering.
She's not exposed.
She either has a really strong no nudity clause in her contract, or that was a very deliberate move by Anna Biller, and I can't decide which.
I think that was deliberate.
Even during the ritual, though, you have the ritual of the coven, and everybody else is basically exposed. She is wearing a very thin pair of flesh-coloured pants.
Yeah.
It is interesting that you have somebody who embodies this sort of sexual need and desire, and is sort of the focal point for that sex. But at the same time, she is also being shrouded and obscured.
And that's why I can't decide whether it's a no nudity clause or whether it's a very clever decision by Biller.
I kind of hope it's a great, clever decision, because
So
it has this wonderful eroticism and anticipation that you do not get when you just expose it.
Yeah.
I don't mean to objectify Samantha Robinson either. That's not what this discussion is about.
No.
It's actually, that is quite...
No, but the whole film is about presenting her to be objectified and then...
not denying us the
basically
possibility.
denying you the possibility of objectifying her.
So it does seem like it's a very deliberate decision, doesn't it?
I really want it to be... And please ask Anna
Biller
Biller about that, and please let it be the other thing.
Anything else we want to talk about while we're here?
Dongs?
No.
We talked about
we're not
dongs.
talking about dongs. What about the monologue? Let's go back to the fair, right?
Yeah.
And the monologue that is happening with Elaine's monologue. Garrett, is that what you call him?
Griff? I think it's Griff.
Griff telling you his take on women and his thought.
Yeah.
And then her thought about, love and marriage, and then him saying like, about women only want to give you more and more, and then start, all that stuff. What are your views on that?
I think it's quite interesting for a change to have this being scripted by a woman.
Yeah.
Because normally we have a monologue like that, it'll be something that some guy has written. So we know that it's his conjecture in terms of what he wants women to think. I think that it's a pretty good summarization of most men's attitude.
I think it's a pretty good summarization of the central conflict that sort of drives the whole film, and why Elaine is not predatory, and why she's actually a figure of pity rather than fear.
I am going to watch this film again. So we could talk about this film for quite a long time.
I think we certainly could.
We probably will, actually, but we're not going to let you listen into all that conversation. So
It'll get violent at a certain point, and nobody wants to hear that. You need to see that.
You'll get violent.
I think it would just turn into sort of one of us sort of punching the other, going, "It's a feminist masterpiece."
Isn't it interesting that it's the woman in the room who's threatening violence at this point? After watching a film where the woman is the violent perpetrator. But she's not predatory.
No.
She's not predatory. Can we cut that bit? That just got really stupid.
Nope.
It's been left in.
So yeah, now this is going to be a two-parter. So we've already hinted at in the episode. We have, in the next episode, we have an interview exclusively with Annabella herself, and you get to hear her take on the production. And I'm very much looking forward to that one as well.
Oh, so am I.
So yeah, we could talk about this film for hours and hours, and we probably will, let's be honest. But you don't get to listen to all of that. We'll have those conversations by ourselves. But, by all means, interact with us. We've got our Facebook and our Twitter, and we've got our website as well. So cinepunked.com. Also find us on Facebook and Twitter, CinePunked. So thanks very much for tuning in. The voices in your ears, as always, have been our producer, Ben Simpson.
Goodbye.
The delightful gender theorist and colleague, Dr. Rachael Kelly.
Goodbye.
And I have been, continue to be, and hopefully will be for some time to come, Robert J.E. Simpson. Do subscribe to us on your favorite chosen platforms. You can leave some comments and reviews on iTunes. We'd really appreciate those. And tune in to us again very, very soon for another exciting episode. Adios.